Hi, everyone. I'm Chelsea Keaton. Thank you for joining us today for this webinar on ensuring EU GMP Annex I compliance while maintaining sterile injectable manufacturing excellence and agility. This webinar is hosted by Endpoints News and sponsored by Grand River Aseptic Manufacturing. Throughout this webinar, you might see it shortened to GRAM. And I'm excited to announce today's expert panelists. We have Mary Lou Glatzbach, Senior Manager, Drug Delivery Partnerships at Grand River Aseptic Manufacturing, and Bettina Baltras, Director, Scientific Affairs Integrated Systems at West Pharmaceutical Services. If you have any questions during today's webinar, our panelists have reserved some time for questions at the end of this webinar. So please hit the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen as soon as you think of a question. This webinar will be available on demand tomorrow to rewatch or to share it with your colleagues. And now I will pass it off to Bettina to get us started.
Thank you very much, Chelsea, for the nice introduction. Good. So, for the ones not that familiar with EU GMP Annex I, we will cover some basics in the beginning, and then we will continue with elaborating how GRAM and West can support you in becoming and staying compliant with Annex I. So the revision of EU GMP Annex I was heavily driven by continuous inspection experience, showing recurring weaknesses in sterility assurance, mostly fragmented contamination control, high-risk human interventions, aseptic behaviors, insufficiently robust cleaning and disinfection, and environmental and process monitoring. So if you visit the FDA recalls database, you will find foreign particulate combined with potential lack of sterility attributable to container closure to account for an average of 38% of product recalls. So EU GMP Annex I was revised primarily to strengthen sterility assurance and thus patient safety. The revised document is actually embedded in the EudraLex, which is the rules governing medicinal products in the European Union. There is a volume 4, guidelines for GMP for medicinal products for human and veterinary use. And that volume has several annexes, and of which the first annex is this Annex I, obviously. But this Annex I is not only relevant for the European Union. Through the joint collaboration with PICS, which also includes the US FDA and the WHO, it is actually endorsed globally. So the document was to request a life cycle, risk-based, holistic contamination control approach while modernizing expectations to reflect current aseptic technologies such as isolators. A specific focus was set on container closure integrity, which can really only be achieved with a profound knowledge and experience on the container closure system. And the expectation is for the companies involved to identify and remediate contamination opportunities and document the proof of compliance in a holistic contamination control strategy document. Annex I starts by anchoring sterile manufacturing in a life cycle pharmaceutical quality system, requiring integrated quality risk management, ICH-Q9, and a documented, regularly reviewed CCS that drives decisions, investigations, CAPA, and ongoing improvement, basically the life cycle approach. Because people are a major contributor to contamination, the personnel chapter tightens requirements for training, qualification, a solid gowning strategy, the famous SOX topic for those who were more involved in industry discussions already, and minimizing manual interventions in critical areas. It then moves to premises, setting expectations for clean room design and qualification, zoning, grade A, B, C, D, and airflows, the first air principle that has also already caused a lot of discussions, and the use of barrier technologies such as isolators to reduce contamination risk at the point of exposure. Next, equipment requirements focus on hygienic design, the ability to clean and sterilize them, prevention of contamination and particulates, and robust qualification and maintenance to sustain the control process. Utilities follow with specific expectations for systems like water, steam, gases, and vacuum, designed, monitored, and controlled to prevent microbial, endotoxin, pyrogen, and particulate contamination. The core production chapter then differentiates aseptic processing and terminal sterilization, sets expectations for sterilization and filtration activities, including filter integrity testing, the famous PUPSIT topic, and it adds specific controls for technologies such as lyophilization and form-fill-seal. It then defines the routine monitoring system, like sampling strategy, alert action limits, trending and review, to demonstrate ongoing state of control, including expectations for aseptic process simulation. Finally, quality control covers sterile-specific QC expectations and test controls, reinforcing that QC supports sterility assurance, but cannot compensate for weak processes or process design and contamination control. The expectation is for the pharmaceutical company or the legal manufacturer of the product to create and maintain one holistic CCS document that includes all the relevant content covering the fill-finish process and the container closure system. In case the fill-finish process is outsourced, the pharma company needs to collect all relevant information from the CDMO and anyway also from the primary packaging suppliers. And with relevant information, I mean all the topics that I've just listed on the previous slide. As we've seen in the introduction slides, foreign particulates attributable to the container closure system account for a significant portion of the recalls. As a consequence, Annex I requires packaging materials to be adequately controlled and tested for bioburden, endotoxins, and particulates. Now, this is not new, but it puts it in the context of the holistic approach. So your CCS must cover container closure selection. And this is where it gets tricky, because historically, there is not one primary packaging manufacturing process that can be easily controlled, but rather multiple processes to form the final product. Here, in the example of a prefilled syringe or prefillable syringe, we can see two of them, but in reality, you have the manufacturing of the needle shield as an additional work stream as well. So the needle shield is produced by one manufacturer and is then sent to the manufacturer of the syringe barrel for assembly. Another work stream is the plunger manufacturing. All streams include initial forming in a clean, not classified CNC area, then moving into either ISO 8 or ISO 5 environments for washing and finishing, and complete with sterilization before moving to the fill finishing. All these areas are potential sources for contamination that need to be assessed, controlled, and finally set in a specification. In worst case, all three work streams are done by different suppliers, which means that the pharmaceutical company needs to receive 3 different CCS documents by 3 different suppliers. This process can be very cumbersome one, as all suppliers have different interpretations of their contribution to the CCS, they have different formats, they have different levels of confidentiality, and so on. In case of missing information or questions, you have to go back to 3 different contacts. The entire process of collecting the information, supplier qualifications, and oversight becomes very resource intensive very quickly. And to mitigate this burden, West has developed the Synchrony S1 prefillable syringe system, which is a designed, released, and delivered as a true one system. So West owns all manufacturing processes. So we own the needle shield, the syringe barrel, and the plunger process. The entire system comes with one item number and is delivered as one pallet at the same time with matching minimum order quantities. And the system is covered in one DMF and one regulatory package to support the other regions in the world. And to support a smooth Annex I integration with one system level specification. So there's one specification for particles, one for silicone oil, and one for endotoxins for the entire prefillable syringe system. This system level specification is also the release criteria on a batch-to-batch basis, and the results are given on one quality certificate with every delivery. Overall, this approach leads to a significant saving in resources, as there is only one CCS document needed coming from one supplier. And this document will include all points that we talked about on the previous slides, such as processes, personnel, utilities, and so on. We can see details on the next slide. So to reiterate, be very clear here, this one CCS contains all the necessary information on environmental controls, personnel, equipment, process, and utilities from all 3 work streams: needle shield, syringe barrel, and plunger in one document. This is realized by starting at the base, stabilizing and standardizing all processes globally, then going into the details with data analytics and trending, and finally using the implemented knowledge management to evolve. And this enables you to realize a much more efficient strategy towards Annex I compliance with one CCS document from one supplier. And just to visualize this again, all the elements of a relevant and comprehensive CCS document listed in that table, related to all the needle shield, the syringe barrel, and the plunger, are contained in one CCS document. And this all-encompassing approach should not only come from the packaging supplier, but also from the CMO.
Well, thank you, Bettina. Walking us through that Annex I, I felt like I was in class. That was great. Appreciate it. So now we're going to move from the discussion of the primary container to the filling of that primary container. And so you're going to see all the same controls here, but realized in a different manner with the filling. And so what I'm going to walk through is Graham's approach to Annex I really at a high level. So we're not going to get really deep into all of these different policies and procedures and controls, but to walk through several of the ways Graham approached process controls, equipment controls, etc. And then our path from reviewing Annex I and then understanding our approach to CCS. And so before we move away from this slide, I did want to just focus out of Bettina's conversation to supplier controls. One of the critical pieces for us in regards to supplier controls is having these wonderful, solid relationships with our suppliers like West. We have to evaluate our suppliers. We have to ensure the integrity of those components that we'll be using. And so there has to be a really solid understanding of what you're receiving from your suppliers and an understanding of how we're going to approach any issues if they occur. And so a really solid partnership like the one that Graham has with West is important as you move forward with your CCS. And so, excuse me, just wanted to say that, that's a critical piece of this, of our evolution with Annex I. And as we start with understanding what those vendors will bring us, we need to understand a common understanding of what will end up in our material specs. So this relationship is important. Okay, so next slide. So when I discuss CDMO today, I am specifically talking about fill and finish. Okay, so in developing the process of filling primary containers like a prefilled syringe, it is critical to master and provide a safe process for effective products for patients, to give to patients. So independent of the delivery system format used, whether it's a vial, a cartridge, or a syringe, it is critical to master to provide those safe products. So you need to keep up with regulatory guidelines when providing sterile filling capabilities, and that's imperative. So as Bettina mentioned, the requirements to control containment is not new, right? But combining all of the different elements into a strategy document is a unique approach. And so that's what we'll be reviewing here today. Okay, so starting, wanted to take a moment and just introduce Graham. For those of you that aren't familiar with Graham, Graham was founded in 2010. We made the decision in 2018 to break ground on a brand new facility. And with that facility came our next facility and then our next facility. So in regards to Annex I, and specifically the facilities approach, we benefited from the fact that we had the Annex I draft requirements in place as we were designing our facilities. So our first facility, we broke ground in 2018, and that was constructed between 2018 and 2020, and then further expanded through 2024. Our second filling facility is currently under construction, and we're looking forward to the delivery of our first line for that facility next year. And then our finishing facility, where we have our analytical laboratories, micro, and all of our sterility labs, as well as our inspection and our packaging and our warehousing, was all constructed in 2021 through 2022. So again, if you have the Annex I document as a draft in front of you as you're designing your facilities, you can approach Annex I through the design. And so it's a purpose-built design that goes into each one of these facilities, and you're building even though your CCS isn't necessarily complete yet, you're building your contamination control strategy into the facility design. So for example, like unidirectional flow, as you're designing the hallways around the filling suites or the formulation suites, you're keeping the unidirectional flow idea of materials in place so that as that facility is constructed, you'll already be compliant to those guidelines. Annex I also has guidelines for utilities. So as you're buying the equipment for your water for injection, for example, and the monitoring systems for your water for injection, that equipment is purchased with Annex I in mind. And through this whole process, you're linking your contamination control strategy to all your policies and procedures so that you'll be compliant when complete. So you keep your QRM as central in your defining the processes, and it's all risk-based, right? So every process has to have a reason for and justification for that processes. So it definitely was an advantage to have Annex I with us as we moved forward on the building of these facilities. So other examples in regards to equipment is the idea through Annex I that you want to minimize human intervention and incorporate robotics or automation where possible. So we were lucky again in that we were purchasing lines at the same time that Annex I draft requirements were put in place. And so, for example, with our filling line, an Annex I requirement is that you need to reject a vial if the stopper is not placed correctly before it is capped. So as you define where the cameras are within your line or around your line, you want to be able to do that, right? So we have cameras around the capping station that allow us to see if the stopper is raised or not sitting correctly, so that there is a reject lane right at that time so it doesn't move on to capping. So as you're picking your equipment or you're working with the CDMO and evaluating their equipment, these are the types of things that you should keep in mind. We also use isolator technology on all of our lines. So we made the decision to use only isolators, okay? And so with Annex I, they provide for you key considerations when performing the risk assessment that you're going to use for the CCS for an isolator. So the Annex I lays out transfer mechanisms that need to be considered, setup, maintenance guidance, the impact of the glove manipulation. So as an operator uses those gloves, want to make sure that it's designed in such a way that it doesn't affect first air. So those all need to be considered. Replacement of the gloves, leak testing, that's all in Annex I. And again, we benefited from having that in place. But if you are looking to move forward with this, there's a lot of guidance that you can look to within those documents. As Bettina mentioned, front and center seems daily for us this idea of PubSit. And so we are PubSit compatible. For those of you that aren't familiar with PubSit, it's a pre-use, post-sterilization integrity test. And so this is around your filter, right? And so pre-use is the idea that you're testing your filter to make sure that when you installed it, that you didn't damage it, right? And so you know that the filter will work from the start through the finish, because at the back end, you're testing again to guarantee that it had integrity throughout the whole process. And Annex I requires you to use PubSit on every batch or provide a risk assessment that defines the process. And so for most clients, we're finding that PubSit is the path we're using. Some clients don't have enough volume in their drug product, and so every last drop is important to them. And so they'll go down the risk assessment route, and then we will help by providing a roadmap for that and work with them on that. Our preference is to use single-use systems. And so when you use single-use systems, it does help with contamination control, and then you don't have all of the CIP, SIP pieces for cleaning. But if you do use a single-use system, you also have to define your process that guarantees the integrity of that system. So if you use a needle assembly that is disposable, you have to make sure that the integrity of that system stayed in place throughout the whole fill and processes for that. And then finally, in the world of isolators and ready-to-use components, there's the question of how do you get those sterilized, ready-to-use tubs that are holding your cartridge or your syringe into your isolator. And so Graham standardized with a double bag tub approach and no touch transfer. And so those tubs will move from the Class C environment through Class B as those bags the outer bag is removed, and then into A. So that's the process we use. And again, having Annex I there for guidance is a nice approach to making decisions. Okay. All right. So as a CDMO, we have multiple clients and multiple drug products. So as a multi-product facility, we need to establish a risk assessment process. And so with every new opportunity that comes in our door, no matter how exciting it is, we need to evaluate that drug product and whether or not it fits within our model. So we have a multi-product facility risk assessment established. As we're designing the facility and designing the equipment and the processes, we establish monitoring systems along the way. So I talked about PubSit earlier. Another monitoring system that we have in place that evaluates the filter is continuous pressure monitoring. So we understand in the development process for each product how much pressure is enough to maintain the bacterial retention within that filter. You can't let the pressure get too high, right? So that bacterial leaves the filter. So we have a continuous pressure monitoring system within there. So establish monitoring systems like this where you can to help, again, bring your CCS into guidance with Annex I and maybe even go beyond. PALs and MALs. So these are over to the right, or I guess it might be your right, my right, is a drawing of our formulation suite. It's a layout of our formulation suite. So built into those suites are airlock systems. And as material and personnel are moving through different areas of classification, you need to control the environment, right? So we've designed airlock systems within this area to make sure that it allows for equilibrium of the airflow during that movement. And this is something that, again, if you're doing this yourself, as you transfer between classified areas, that process needs to be thoroughly assessed and understood. We also built in, bag out high efficiency filtration system. So Graham does not process highly potent products, but there are some biologics that are out there today where we do control exposure to our operators. And so in that case, we have the ability to offer this bag in, bag out high efficiency filtration system that allows removal or changing of the filter without actually touching it. And then this final item here is discussing airflow. So if you've ever seen the airflow within an isolator, or you can't actually see it, but the idea of the airflow so to maintain the laminar flow, it's critical to really understand that that airflow is operating in the way it's designed to. And so how we verify that is through smoke studies. We also use smoke studies. So you do that with the doors closed, right? But we also use smoke studies with the doors open. So several of the parts of our line are actually sterilized even before they're assembled. You close the door and you complete the VHP process. So for those parts that are sterilized before assembly, we want to understand that once we put that in place and it's sterilized, that the airflow is designed in such a way that you maintain that sterility. And so you want to make sure that nothing moves, no airflow moves from a lower area C to an A. And so again, we do the smoke studies with the door open as well to visualize that and make sure that that process is working. And one last thing before we go to the last page, and I think this is another aspect that's important with our relationship with West, is to understand that contamination is not just microbial. And Bettina covered that a little bit in her piece, and that is that we need to control particulate as well. And so as you're working with your the suppliers that will be providing the components that we receive, so to fill your product, everything they can do to help control particulate helps us and eventually helps you, right? So it's not just controlling, it's the microbial piece, it's also the particulate. Okay, next page. All right, so Annex I asks for a risk-based approach as you're establishing your processes, right? So we have brought in automation where we can. That automation allows us or offers us consistency and precision in our operations. We've put robotics in where we can, so to minimize human error and any contamination that human might bring. But I wanted to go now to the actual process used in establishing or understanding where we sat versus Annex I, so to develop our processes and our contamination control strategy. So each section of Annex I, or the Annex I is broken up into multiple sections. So what we did is we gave that and assigned that to department heads, and that they then, again, this is not a novel idea. Aseptic filling has been going on for decades, right? So controlling contamination has been part of our life. But what these heads had to do was to take the documents that we already had, the processes that we had in place, and compare that to Annex I and identify the gaps. And then formalize a report. And we provided that to our clients for their feedback. And in many cases, we have clients that are manufacturing themselves, correct? So they're studying these documents. They're going to have their own CCSs, right? And so they're developing their interpretation of the guidelines, and we're sitting down and having discussion, creating this feedback loop of discussion, listening, sharing ideas, so to create action and then follow up. And the CCS is a living document. It requires regular updates and assessment. It's linked to all your processes, your SOPs, and your qualifications. And so you want that to evolve as different processes evolve in the market and different ideas about contamination evolve. And so this, as we see, is a living document that we work with both internal organizations as well as external to make sure that we are in compliance or beyond and above compliance. Okay, next slide. So again, this is ever evolving. It's a collaborative process, creating a reliable, self-focused, and quality-driven document. We at Graham have regular client audits that challenge our processes and help us guide decisions as we evolve. Another way we stay on top of the market as it's evolving is we create strong relationships and strategic partnerships with our pharmaceutical partners, the equipment manufacturers, so the OEMs that are making the lines or the isolators. They're studying the evolution and discussing with other clients. And so it helps us stay on top of what's happening. Primary container component suppliers like West, continuously talking with them, having strong relationships and strategic partnerships with them is invaluable. Participating in industry associations like ISPE and all the other industry associations that are out there, a lot of discussion around Annex I and the guidelines. And so I'd strongly recommend that you have people participating in those events. And then device manufacturers as well. So before I close up, I just wanted to kind of restate some of the things that my MS&T team tells me as they and the operations team and the quality team as they're continuously evaluating our processes. Number one, study Annex I, know the document, read and reread it, review quality, process, and compliance, or read with quality, process, and compliance in mind. Take a risk-based approach because your CCS requires a reason for and justification for all processes. And that collaboration is key, right? So multiple perspectives from different departments, different organizations, both internal and external, will only make this document stronger. So, Bettina?
Oh, I was muted. Thank you very much, Mary Lou. And as we move towards the end, I just want to remind everyone to put your questions into the Q&A box so that we can answer them after the webinar presentation. So as Mary Lou mentioned, keeping in mind that EU GMP Annex I compliance is a collaborative journey. So the road to sustainability always starts with people. And just like Mary Lou explained, we all made sure to define multidisciplinary teams that own and oversee the CCS strategy. Nothing works in isolation, so building a community of practice, both internally but also externally with partners such as CDMOs, like the partnership with Graham, packaging suppliers, industry peers at conferences and industry events, is crucial to stay updated and state of the art. We've all set up a process to approach the CCS in a structured and data-driven way that is part of and overseen in company policies. And to remain up to date, the strategy needs to be embedded in a life cycle approach, continuously benchmarked and improved using evolving knowledge management. All right, so summarizing the most important points from this webinar. First of all, you need a holistic contamination control strategy document. I think this should be clear to, I would say, everyone by now already. Then both the primary packaging and the fill finish process are absolutely in scope. In order to make your life as efficient as possible, you should work together with partners who can provide you with everything you need. And with West Synchrony S1 PFS system, you will get one CCS document for the entire syringe system. And during CDMO evaluation, you should look for effective collaboration, continuous evolving with facilities that have the equipment and processes that match with Annex I and beyond, and other regulatory organizations. It is a continuous improvement process, so we all have to work together to stay up to date on this. And with this, we're at the end of our webinar and happy to receive any questions from you. Thank you.
Thank you to everyone in the audience for tuning in, and thank you so much to Mary Lou and Bettina for sharing your time and expertise. We do have some questions here. When will the Synchrony solution be available at Graham for clinical manufacture?
So do you want to take that?
No, go ahead. That's a nice one, Mary.
We're both excited for the answer. We actually have 1 ml long and 2 1/4 tubs sitting at Graham already, and so we will be running those in the first quarter of next year on our existing Variosis line. And then we're also working with West on our new syringe line that will be coming next year to test those during the SAT process. So once the line is brought to Graham, that will be probably run toward the end of 2026. So we will have the ability to run clinicals after that first quarter validation run next year. And then on our higher volume line, it will be toward the end of 2026, early 27 for higher volume products.
Excellent. What advancements, if any, have been made to the Synchrony syringe?
Yeah, so if I understand that question correctly, then it's forward-looking already. So the name states already West Synchrony S1 prefillable syringe system. So we're currently at S1. We're launching S1 at PharmaPack in January in Paris. And so advancements to the syringe, to the Synchrony syringe, we are working in the background. Obviously, we're not standing still. So we also want to be state of the art. So we're working in the background already on new technologies, improving performance, adding aspects like sustainability, improved functionalities. We do that in the background. So we're very happy to have a meeting with you and discuss further details on the upcoming innovation, on the upcoming future innovations.
Wonderful. And is the syringe going to be ISO compliant?
Yes, absolutely. So the Synchrony S1 PFS system, from a syringe perspective, the syringe barrel is made of borosilicate type 1 glass. To be more precise, it's the shot Fiolex glass that everyone knows already. It's very well established, globally used by the majority of products on the market already. And the syringe dimensions are compliant with ISO 11040-4. So you can use, as proven, your already existing qualified fill finish equipment without major changes. And yeah, I think so the syringe barrel is ISO 11040-4 compliant, and then the plungers, obviously, they're also 11040-5 compliant. For plungers, we use the NovaPure plunger, which is a very well-known established plunger, our highest quality portfolio that is used with the majority of biologics already since many years. We have the Fluorotec plungers in the portfolio and unlaminated ones as well. So they're all ISO 11040-5 compliant. Yes.
That's great. Now, have you tested compatibility with auto-injectors?
Yes, very good question. We have done that in preparation. So we've worked together with the two leading auto-injector suppliers, and we have shown compatibility to their major or to their most prominent platform. And we can share data. Obviously, we can go more into details and share data in a meeting, of course. Yeah.
And who is the glass syringe manufacturer?
Yeah, of course. That is also always a very obvious question. Who is manufacturing the glass syringe? So I can tell you, no, West is not, maybe yet, not going into the glass manufacturing business. We have chosen a very well-established, qualified glass syringe manufacturer in the field, that is Gerresheimer, and they are producing the glass syringe barrels for us. Yes.
Would a glass syringe supplier not be able to provide a single CCS document, even if they are selling the syringe as one package?
Yeah. So in general, it all comes down to the availability of the details, the availability of the data, and the ownership. So if you're owning the process and you have designed, developed, and you're owning the process and the product, you have a very deep understanding of all the process details and of all the design details. And also you're owning the specification. So we have developed the design, we have developed the entire syringe, including the syringe barrel. We have set the specification, which includes the particle, the endotoxin, and the bioburden specification. And that is something that you cannot say about just the syringe manufacturer. The syringe manufacturer buys the plunger, the plunger, actually the pharma company buys the plunger. So the glass manufacturer is typically not even involved in the plunger. They oftentimes don't even know which plunger is used by the pharmaceutical company. So with that in mind, they would not be able to provide one CCS document that includes all the, you have to think about utilities, personnel, the gowning details, the facility outlines. This is all information that they would not have that information. And so I can say a clear no, the syringe supplier would not be able to provide one single CCS document that comprises the needle shield, the syringe barrel, and the plunger.
Great. Well, that's all the time we have for today. Thank you to everyone in the audience, and thank you to our panelists for sharing your expertise. And if you would like to rewatch the webinar or share it with colleagues, a link for on-demand viewing will be sent tomorrow. Thank you for joining us, and we hope to see you all soon.